Let's continue with some simple string methods. And the first two are going to be for changing the case of a string. So that's airline dot to lowercase, and this doesn't require any arguments at all. And then we also have to uppercase, and these we use all the time, as you will see soon in a more real world example. And here you see that indeed they transformed the string all to lowercase and to uppercase. And again, you can of course call these directly also on a string. So like this, all right? But now let's use this on a more practical example to fix the capitalization in a passenger name. In name. Okay. So let's say that the passenger, when he checked in, misspelled his name. And so it looks like this now. And so this needs to be fixed. It should look like this. Okay. So in order to fix it, the first step is usually to put everything into lowercase here. So const passenger lower is passenger dot to lowercase like this. Okay, so basically we already have now this part here, and now all we need to do is to essentially take the first letter and then the rest of the string and put these two parts back together. So passenger correct will be passenger lowercase, and here we only need the first letter. So how do we do that? We take the first letter by using the index 0. And so this one we now convert to uppercase. All right. And now we simply need to add the rest of the string. So again, we take passenger lower, and then we use the slice that we learned in the last lecture and start at position number 1. Because remember, that will then go to index 1 and take everything until the end of the string. And so here we then put back together just the first part of the string converted to uppercase here, and then the rest of the string that we already had converted to lowercase before. Okay, and indeed, now it is corrected. Great. And of course, we could have done a function with this. And so maybe if you have the time, you can do that. So just create a function which takes any passenger name and then returns the correct one. So with the fixed capitalization. But anyway, I will now do another real life example, which is to check a user input email. Okay. So check email. Now this will not be really a checking, it will more be a comparing. So comparing emails. So let's say that we have the email of one passenger. So hello@jonas.io. But now as the user logs in, so let's say login email, accidentally they do it all wrong, and they start with a couple of spaces here, and then the capitalization is all completely off, like this, and then maybe even another space, or even an enter character, which remember is \n. So I think we talked about that in the beginning, okay? But still, this email here is actually still kind of correct and kind of valid. And so we can now still compare if these two are kind of the same. Okay, so we can now try to convert this one to this one and then check if they are the same. Because essentially, again, they are. They would be different if we had like different letters here. Then of course they would not be the same. But here it's just a matter of capitalization. And for emails, I believe that they are still valid even with the capitalization off. And so when we check user input like this, the first step is usually to convert it to lowercase. So lower email is login email dot to lower case. And then we must also get rid of all the white space here. So these empty spaces and also this enter basically here also counts as a white space. So there is even a method for that. So let's say trimmed email. And so that is lower email dot trim. All right. Let's just now log this to the console just to see. And so that looks exactly like that first version. Now, just look closely at what we did here. So we called to lowercase on this login email, stored it to this variable, and then on that variable, we called the trim method. But why do we even need this intermediate email? We could do this all in one step. So basically, we can replace all of this, and let's call this normalized email, actually. And so, again, I will start from login email, and then do it all in one step. Dot to lowercase. And now this is a bit similar to what we did before with the map set method. So this here will return a new string, right? And on strings, we can call string methods. And therefore, right here, we can now immediately call the trim method. Okay, so normalized email, and that should look exactly the same. And it does. So let's get rid of this. And these two I will simply leave as a comment here. And now just to finish, let's actually also compare them for the sake of completion. And once again, you could do this here in a separate function. So you could do a function for this behavior where you pass in two emails, one which is the correct one and one which is the one to check. And then you could return either true or false from that. So again, that sounds like a good challenge that you can take if you want. And by the way here, since ES 2019, there's also trim start and trim end, which as their names say, you can use to trim whitespace only from the start of the string or only from the end. Next up, let's learn one of the most important things about strings, which is to replace parts of strings. So replacing. Okay. And we're going to stay here again with the airlines. So let's say we have the price of a flight, and that price is for Great Britain. So let's say 288,97 pounds. And you can use any other currency sign that you want here. What's important is that here in Europe, we use the comma as a decimal separator, unlike in the US, where you use the period, so the dot. And so that's actually what we're going to do now. We want to compute the price in US. All right. And so for that, we will need to replace the pound with the dollar sign and the comma with the period. So that's easy enough. Price Great Britain dot replace. And now here two arguments. The first one is the one we want to replace. And let's start here with the pound sign. And the second argument is the string that will replace the first one. So let's take a look. Price US. And so that already worked. And now we need to replace also the comma with the period. So we could create another variable now, but instead we will do chaining again, just like we did before. And for the same reason, because this returns a string. And so on that string, we will immediately call the next replace method. And now we are replacing the comma with the dot. And so, indeed, now we have the price in US. Okay, but indeed, we can also replace entire words, not just single characters. So let's create an announcement that you would typically hear on the airport, like all passengers come to boarding door 23. Boarding door 23. However, usually it is called gate and not door. And so let's replace that and log the result to the console immediately. Because just like the other method that we studied, replace also creates a brand new string. It doesn't mutate the original one. And so here it's the same. And so we need to log the actual result to the console. So replace door with gate. And here it's boarding. And now let's check it out here. So here, boarding gate, but then here you actually still have boarding door. And so this replace only replaced the first occurrence of this search string here. Okay? And actually that's completely normal. That's just how the replace method works. So again, this method will only replace the very first occurrence of this search string. So in this case, the door. But the rest of them will simply stay the same. So they will not get updated. But fortunately for us, there's also the replace all method, which, as the name says, will actually replace all the occurrences of the search string. So in this case, it will replace all the doors with gates, basically. Now, at the time that I was recording this video, this method wasn't available in JavaScript yet. And so that's why here we get this error. But never mind about this, because now that you're watching this video, this will actually work. And so you should definitely go ahead and use this solution right here, so the replace all method, whenever you need to replace multiple occurrences of a certain substring inside the bigger string. Now, besides this solution, there's also another solution that was available before we had the replace all method, which involves using a regular expression, which is what I'm going to show you next. Now, regular expressions are one of the most complex and confusing topics of programming, but for now we are just going to use a very simple regular expression to tell the replace method that it should actually target all the occurrences of door here and not just the first one. So let's again copy this here. And then to create a regular expression, we need to write the string between slashes. So not between quotes. So it turned yellow here again, which means that it's some kind of string, but it is now a so-called regular expression. Then in this case, all we want to do with this regular expression is to add this G flag here. And this stands for global. And that's actually it. So right now, all the occurrences will be targeted. And so we replaced gate here and here. All right. And just as a side note here, once more, the replace method is of course also case sensitive. So just like all of the other string methods are. Okay, and now as a final topic of this lecture, there are three simple methods that return booleans. So booleans, okay? And these methods are includes, starts with, and ends with. So let's create a new plane here. And that's going to be the A320 Neo. And I'm just missing here the assignment. And now we can simply use includes just like we can in arrays one more time. So they have a very similar structure here in terms of methods that we can use on them. So includes, And let's test if it includes the string A320. And indeed, it does. So this airplane here is the Airbus 320neo, but it still includes just the A320. Now, let's say if it includes Boeing, and of course it doesn't. And now there's another one, which is the starts with. And this one is also actually very much used. I remember using it very recently. And so in this case here, it is false. All right. But then if we change this here to Airbus, then it is indeed true. Okay. So these three letters here are indeed the first three also here. So it doesn't have to match the entire word. So just AI would also be true, but AI B, let's say, would then be false. Because of course the string does not start with these three letters. With Air B, then it would again be true. Okay? And of course this A320 is also still true as long as it is somewhere in the string. So now it's somehow here in the middle. Okay? So let's try something very simple here. So let's say that we want to check if the current plane is part of the new Airbus family. And so all we need to do to check that is to see if the plane name starts with Airbus, and we can already confirm that it is, right? And we also need to check if it ends with Neo, because that means that it's part of the new Airbus family. And so we can also use ends with. So as always, these methods here that return booleans are especially helpful for conditionals like this. Part of the new Airbus family. And indeed, this one here is. But of course, if it was just the regular A320, then that would not get logged to the console. So whenever you need to take some decision based on the contents of the string, these three methods are very, very helpful. And let's now actually practice that a little bit with some kinds of, we can say a practice exercise. And so here we want to check if the baggage of a certain passenger is basically allowed to be checked in. So to be allowed on the plane. So check baggage function. And then here we get the items. And let me again first call the function to show you what I mean. So basically the passenger here says what they have. So I have a laptop, some food, and a pocket knife. Then let's call this again and say we have, or I have some socks and a camera. And then let's call it a third time with the string now, got some snacks and a gun for protection. Okay. So maybe some passenger would bring a gun to a plane. But so now let's make sure they will not get aboard the plane. And actually, let's change some things here. So let's make this uppercase. Let's say this person likes to write uppercase for some reason. Okay. And so this is important to show you once again that when we receive input from a user, we usually always start by putting everything into lowercase. Okay. Because that makes it a lot easier to then compare it to something. Well, let's simply say baggage here. And so baggage is basically items to lowercase. So this one we use all the time. And now we can just check if the baggage includes a knife or a gun. And in that case, the person is not allowed on board. So if baggage dot includes, and so here is that method again, which returns a Boolean. So if it includes knife, or if it, so baggage includes a gun, then we say you are not allowed on board. Else, let's log welcome aboard. All right. And so now let's see here why it is so important to convert everything first to lowercase. So in this example here, this first person has knife, but with an uppercase. And so if we didn't convert this to lowercase, then this includes here would be false, because the lowercase knife is different than the uppercase knife. Okay, so let's see the result. And so indeed, this person has a knife, so they are not allowed. This person here is fine. And then this one has a gun. And so, of course, they're also not allowed. But now, if we took away this here, well, then our code is not really going to work. So let's just delete this part for now. So if we didn't have the two lowercase, then the first person would also be welcome aboard. And again, that's because knife here, uppercase, is different from this knife. And so then we would have to check for all the variations, like knife like this, or this knife, or even this. So every possible variation. And so that would be highly impractical. And so we just turn everything to lowercase. So again, so that we can then easily compare it with one standard, which is this and this. All right, perfect. So that was another fun lecture, if you ask me, and I hope you are feeling the same. Now it's time for a break, and I see you back here in the next video.